It was a warm afternoon in the quiet suburban neighborhood, the kind of place where children played freely in yards, and neighbors waved to each other as they passed on the streets. Birds chirped from the trees, and the distant hum of traffic was faint, barely noticeable. Everything seemed peaceful, ordinary, and safe. That peace, however, was about to be shattered in a way that no one expected. A teenage boy was walking down the main street, his backpack slung casually over one shoulder. He had just finished running a few errands for his family and was heading home, looking forward to a quiet evening. He was thoughtful, careful, and had never been in any trouble before. People who knew him described him as kind, respectful, and responsible, a boy who always tried to do the right thing. As he walked past the corner store, he noticed something unusual. A small commotion had drawn the attention of a few onlookers, who were whispering to each other and pointing toward a display outside the shop. Curious, the boy slowed his pace, his eyes scanning the area. From a distance, it looked like a minor argument, but as he got closer, he realized that a store employee was accusing someone of taking something without paying. Before the boy could even react, a police car pulled up abruptly. Two officers stepped out, their expressions serious and urgent. They moved quickly toward the scene, and in their haste they seemed not to notice the boy standing nearby, merely observing. The situation escalated quickly, and in a matter of moments the officers had focused on the boy as if he were the culprit. "Hey, stop right there!" one officer barked. The boy froze, startled by the sudden shout. He tried to explain that he hadn't done anything, that he was just passing by, but the officer's tone was harsh, commanding, and full of suspicion. "Don't move," the officer said, stepping closer. "We have reason to believe you were involved." The boy's heart pounded in his chest. He couldn't understand what was happening. He had never been in trouble with the law before. His hands trembled slightly as he raised them, trying to show he wasn't a threat. "I didn't do anything," he said clearly, hoping his voice would be enough to convince them. But the officers were already leaning in, their demeanor aggressive. They accused him of trying to take an item from the store, misinterpreting his presence near the display. The boy's protests fell on deaf ears. The crowd of onlookers grew uneasy, murmuring among themselves. Some stepped closer, trying to understand the situation, while others remained at a cautious distance, unsure how to act. The boy felt a growing sense of fear and confusion. He was surrounded by authority figures who were not listening, and he had no way to defend himself. His mind raced, trying to make sense of the misunderstanding. "Please," he said, his voice pleading. "I didn't take anything. You've got the wrong person." One of the officers grabbed his arm firmly, ignoring his protests. The sudden touch sent a jolt of panic through him. He tried to pull away, but the grip was strong, unyielding. The other officer moved behind him, blocking any chance of escape. The boy's fear escalated. He felt trapped, helpless, and small in the face of such authority. The onlookers began to react more strongly. A woman in the crowd shouted, "He didn't do anything. Let him go." Others took out their phones, recording the incident as it unfolded. The air was thick with tension, the peaceful afternoon replaced by a sense of danger and injustice. Despite the chaos, the boy remained composed as best as he could. He realized that panic would not help him. He tried to speak calmly, explaining the misunderstanding, hoping that reason might reach the officers. "I'm telling the truth," he said, his voice shaking slightly. "I was just walking by. I didn't touch anything. Please check the cameras or ask someone who was here." But the officers seemed uninterested in listening. Their faces were stern, their body language rigid and unyielding. One officer stepped closer, lowering his voice so only the boy could hear. "You're lucky we don't have enough evidence to take you in right now," he said menacingly. "But don't think you're off the hook. You should be careful next time." The boy felt his stomach twist in knots. He couldn't believe what was happening. He had always respected authority, always followed the rules, yet here he was, treated as a criminal for no reason at all. Tears threatened to well up in his eyes, but he forced himself to stay strong, knowing that losing control could make things worse. Nearby, the crowd grew restless. Whispers turned to shouts as people expressed their outrage at the unfair treatment. Some tried to intervene, speaking to the officers, asking them to reconsider. Others continued recording, determined to make sure there was a record of what was happening. The tension in the park and on the street was palpable. Neighbors had come out of their homes, drawn by the noise and the commotion. The boy's friends, who had been walking a few steps behind him, finally arrived at the scene. Their faces were filled with concern and disbelief as they saw him being confronted by the police. "Stop!" one of them shouted. "You're making a mistake. He didn't do anything." The officers barely acknowledged them, focused entirely on the boy. The situation was spiraling, and the boy felt a mix of anger, fear, and frustration. He wanted to scream, to make them understand, but he knew that anger would only escalate the situation further. He needed someone to help mediate, someone who could ensure that justice was done. As the confrontation continued, a few more neighbors gathered, creating a small crowd around the scene. Some were trying to reason with the officers, while others were simply watching, shocked by the audacity of the police behavior. The boy's parents, having been alerted by a neighbor, arrived moments later. Their faces were filled with worry and disbelief as they saw their child being treated unfairly. "What's going on here?" his mother demanded, rushing forward. "Why are you treating him this way? He hasn't done anything." The officer's response was dismissive. "We have reason to believe he's involved," one said, his voice cold. "He's lucky we're not taking him in right now." The boy's father stepped in, trying to keep his voice calm but firm. "There's no reason for this. You're making a mistake. Please check the facts. He didn't touch anything. You're wrong." Despite their pleas, the officers continued their harsh treatment. The boy felt a surge of helplessness. He had always believed that authority figures were there to protect and uphold justice, yet now he was experiencing the opposite. The fear of being falsely accused, the humiliation in front of neighbors, and the anger of being treated unfairly all collided in his mind. It was in this moment, as the tension reached its peak, that a sudden commotion drew everyone's attention. A black SUV pulled up quickly, and the crowd parted as a figure stepped out. The boy's parents and friends turned in surprise, as did the onlookers and even the officers themselves. The figure moved with confidence and authority, and it quickly became clear that this was someone important, someone whose presence alone could change the dynamics of the situation. The boy, still trembling, watched in awe and disbelief. He had never expected that someone so influential would arrive at the scene, someone who could ensure fairness and justice. The moment the influential figure arrived, the atmosphere around the small street corner shifted dramatically. The boy, still clutching his backpack, felt his chest tighten with both fear and hope. He had never imagined that anyone so prominent would appear to intervene on his behalf. The crowd of onlookers, previously tense and uncertain, now murmured in amazement, whispering about the unexpected arrival. Some raised their phones higher, recording what could become a story for the world to see. The officers who had moments ago been so aggressive now shifted uneasily. Their postures stiffened as they tried to regain control over a situation that had clearly gone beyond their expectations. The influential figure, calm but commanding, addressed them directly, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone pause. "Explain to me why this boy is being treated this way," he demanded. "Why is he being threatened for doing nothing wrong?" The officers hesitated. One cleared his throat, glancing at the other, unsure of how to respond under the scrutiny. We had reason to believe he was involved in a theft," he stammered. "We acted on what we thought was probable cause." The figure shook his head slowly, his gaze unwavering. "Probable cause?" he repeated, his voice firm but not angry. "Do you understand the weight of your actions? This is not a game. A young person's life, reputation, and sense of safety are at stake. You cannot act on assumptions alone." The boy, standing a few steps away, felt a surge of relief wash over him. Finally, someone was listening. Someone who could ensure that justice was not ignored. The weight of fear he had carried all afternoon began to lift, though his heart still raced. He looked around at the crowd, noting the faces of neighbors, friends, and strangers who had gathered. They were watching, some recording, some whispering, all witnessing the power of intervention and accountability. The boy's parents stepped closer, holding his arms protectively. Their faces were a mix of relief and lingering worry. His mother spoke, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for coming. He's innocent. He didn't do anything wrong. Please make them understand." The influential figure nodded, giving a reassuring glance to the boy and his family. "I'm here to make sure that what is right is done," he said softly. Then, turning to the officers again, he continued firmly, "You are responsible for upholding the law, not using it to intimidate or humiliate. This boy has done nothing wrong. You need to step back and handle this appropriately." The officers exchanged nervous glances, realizing the gravity of the situation. They had been caught in the spotlight. their actions scrutinized by both the influential figure and the growing crowd of witnesses. Their earlier confidence had eroded, replaced with hesitation and uncertainty. Meanwhile, the boy tried to steady his breathing. The fear he had carried for hours began to transform into a cautious sense of hope. He realized that sometimes standing alone could feel terrifying. But when someone with authority or influence intervened, the world shifted. He began to understand that justice was not just about laws and rules. It was about people being willing to speak up when wrongs occurred. The crowd's whispers grew louder, a mixture of curiosity, concern, and support. Some of the neighbors who had initially stayed at a distance now stepped forward, offering their voices in solidarity with the boy. "He didn't do anything," one woman shouted. "Let him go!" Others raised their phones, recording the conversation between the influential figure and the officers. It became clear that this incident was no longer a private matter. It was public, documented, and being shared in real time. The boy felt a mixture of pride and apprehension. He had never sought attention, yet now his story was unfolding in front of the entire neighborhood, witnessed by countless eyes. As the confrontation continued, the influential figure asked the boy directly, "Are you all right? Can you tell me exactly what happened?" The boy nodded, his voice trembling slightly as he spoke. I was just walking past the store. I had finished running errands and was on my way home. I didn't touch anything. I don't understand why they thought I did something wrong." The figure listened carefully, nodding, then turned back to the officers. "Do you see now?" he asked. "This is a misunderstanding, nothing more. You need to acknowledge that and correct it immediately. This boy is not a criminal. Treating him as one is unacceptable." The officers shifted uncomfortably. They were aware of the growing number of witnesses, the recording devices capturing every moment, and the presence of someone whose influence and authority could hold them accountable. Slowly, they began to step back, their aggressive stance softening. One officer muttered, We understand. We'll handle it appropriately." The boy's parents released him gently, their hands trembling as they held on to each other. Relief washed over them. Their child was safe, and now there was hope that justice would be restored. The boy felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease, though he remained vigilant, aware that the situation could still change. The influential figure addressed the crowd, speaking clearly and calmly. "This is a reminder that we must always be mindful of how we treat others, especially young people. Accusations and assumptions can cause harm. We must act with fairness, responsibility, and humanity." The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, some nodding, others raising their voices in support. The boy felt a warmth in his chest as he realized the impact of the words. People were listening and the truth was being heard. The officers, now fully aware of the scrutiny, began to back away from the boy entirely. One of them spoke quietly to his partner. "We need to review this carefully. We can't act on assumptions anymore." The influential figure nodded approvingly. "Good, that is the right approach. Mistreatment of anyone, especially a young person, cannot be tolerated. Let this be a lesson in accountability." As the tension slowly dissipated, the boy's friends approached him, their expressions filled with relief and admiration. They clapped him on the back, whispering words of encouragement. "You did great," one said. "You stayed calm and strong. Look, everything's getting sorted now." The boy felt a mixture of emotions, relief, pride, and lingering fear. He had faced a frightening situation, one that could have gone terribly wrong, yet he had survived and justice was beginning to prevail. He looked at the influential figure once more, feeling gratitude that went beyond words. I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice sincere. The figure smiled gently. "You've done the right thing by staying calm and truthful. That is more important than anything else. The rest will take care of itself." The boy's parents stepped forward, thanking the figure repeatedly. They had been terrified watching their child treated unfairly, and now they could finally breathe. The moment was transformative, not just for the boy, but for everyone who had witnessed it. The boy stood frozen for a moment, still clutching his backpack, as the influential figure spoke to the officers. A hush had fallen over the crowd. The whispers and murmurs that had filled the street just minutes ago were replaced by tense silence. Everyone present seemed to hold their breath, waiting for what would happen next. The boy's heart still pounded in his chest, though now the fear had begun to shift into a strange mix of hope and anticipation. He realized that something extraordinary was unfolding right before his eyes. The officers, though trying to maintain authority, could not hide the unease in their posture. They glanced at each other, then back at the influential figure, and finally at the boy. They had been accustomed to following their own procedures, issuing commands and enforcing rules. But the sudden presence of someone with a commanding reputation had altered the balance of power. They were no longer simply enforcing rules. They were being watched, evaluated, and called to account in real time. One officer cleared his throat, his voice cautious. "Sir, we were only doing our duty." There was concern about a potential theft. The influential figure held up a hand, cutting him off gently but firmly. "Doing your duty does not mean mistreating a child. You acted without verifying facts, without listening, and without compassion. That is not duty. That is negligence, and it will not be tolerated." The boy felt a wave of relief wash over him. Hearing someone speak so decisively on his behalf made the weight of the day's fear begin to lift. Yet he was also overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. He had never imagined that his ordinary walk home would turn into such a public ordeal. Yet here he was, surrounded by witnesses, officers, and someone whose presence alone commanded attention. As the officers struggled to find words, the influential figure stepped closer to the boy. His gaze softened and his voice became calm and reassuring. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Tell me what happened from your point of view." The boy swallowed hard and began recounting the events, his voice trembling at first but growing steadier as he spoke. "I was just walking past the store," he said. "I hadn't touched anything. I didn't even go inside. I was just walking home from running errands for my family. I don't understand why they thought I did something wrong. I didn't do anything." The figure listened carefully, nodding occasionally. His expression was thoughtful, but his eyes conveyed concern and empathy. He turned back to the officers. "Do you hear that?" he said. "This boy has explained everything clearly. There is no evidence against him. Yet he has been treated like a criminal. Is that how you enforce justice?" The officers looked at each other uneasily. They knew that the crowd was recording, capturing every word, every gesture, every expression. Their earlier confidence had dissolved into nervousness. They realized they were facing not only an influential figure, but also the eyes of the community and the possibility of broader public scrutiny. The boy's friends, who had been standing nearby, whispered among themselves. "I can't believe this is happening," one said. "He didn't do anything, and now he's caught up in all of this." Another added, "It's good that someone important showed up. Otherwise, who knows what could have happened." The influential figure's attention returned fully to the boy. "You did the right thing by staying calm," he said. "I know it was frightening and I know it felt unfair. But your courage in this moment matters. Do you understand that?" The boy nodded, though his voice was barely audible. "Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to get home safely." The figure smiled faintly. "And you will. But it's important to know that standing up, staying calm, and telling the truth makes a difference. That is how you face situations like this." Meanwhile, the officers were slowly backing away, clearly realizing that the dynamic had shifted. The tension that had gripped the street was beginning to ease, though a sense of unease lingered among them. They knew that their actions were being scrutinized and that they could no longer act with the same impunity as before. The crowd, sensing the change, began to murmur with approval. People who had been worried now exchanged glances, some nodding, others whispering encouragement to the boy. The presence of the influential figure had not only provided immediate protection, but also sent a message to the community. Injustice would not go unnoticed. The boy's parents moved closer, holding his arms protectively. His mother whispered softly, "It's going to be okay now. You're safe." His father added, "You've been brave. We're proud of you." The words were a balm to the boy's frayed nerves, offering reassurance and comfort in the midst of a highly stressful moment. The influential figure addressed the crowd, speaking with a voice that carried both authority and warmth. "This incident is a reminder that our actions have consequences," he said. "We must treat each other with fairness, empathy, and respect. Mistreating a child for assumption or mistakes is unacceptable. We all have a responsibility to uphold justice." The crowd responded with murmurs of agreement, some nodding, others raising their phones to continue recording the encounter. The boy felt a strange mixture of pride and humility. His story, once a personal moment of fear and vulnerability, was now a lesson in fairness and accountability for everyone watching. The officers, now fully aware of the scrutiny and potential consequences, began to take a more conciliatory approach. We apologize for the misunderstanding, one said cautiously. We acted hastily and it was not our intention to cause harm. The boy felt a small sense of vindication. While he had wanted nothing more than to be understood and to go home safely, the acknowledgement of wrongdoing, however hesitant, was a step toward resolution. The influential figure nodded approvingly. Apologies are a start, he said. But understanding, accountability, and correction are what truly matter. Let's ensure this doesn't happen again. The boy's friends whispered among themselves again. I can't believe how brave he was, one said. He stayed calm even when they were so aggressive. Another added, and look at what happened because of it. It's amazing that someone important stepped in. The boy, still processing the whirlwind of events, felt a mixture of emotions: relief, pride, lingering fear, and a newfound understanding of justice. He realized that bravery was not just about fighting or shouting, but also about staying calm, speaking the truth, and trusting that the right actions could be recognized and supported. As the influential figure, the tension in the street had begun to dissipate, but a quiet unease lingered in the air. The boy still clutched his backpack, feeling both relief and exhaustion. He had survived the immediate danger, but the memory of the aggressive approach, the accusations, and the fear he had felt all afternoon still pressed on him. He could feel his heart thumping as he replayed each moment, the weight of the experience settling heavily on his shoulders. The influential figure, who had intervened so decisively, remained nearby. Though calm, his presence carried a sense of authority that kept the officers from returning to their earlier aggression. The boy's parents stayed close, holding his hands and offering quiet reassurances, their faces filled with a mix of relief and lingering worry. Friends and neighbors lingered at a respectful distance, still processing what had just occurred. The officers, for their part, were clearly shaken. Their posture had shifted from confidence to caution. One of them muttered under his breath to his partner, I didn't expect this. We can't just brush it off now. His partner nodded grimly, understanding the gravity of the moment. Their actions were no longer private. They had been witnessed, recorded, and now subject to scrutiny from both the public and someone whose presence alone carried immense weight. The influential figure turned to the officers, his voice firm but measured. You need to acknowledge the mistakes that were made here, he said. It's not enough to simply walk away. The boy has been mistreated, and that cannot be ignored. You must take responsibility and ensure this does not happen again. The officers shifted uncomfortably, glancing at each other. One spoke hesitantly. We apologize for how we handled the situation. It was wrong to treat him as we did. The influential figure nodded. Acknowledgement is important, he said, but so is action. Review your procedures. Learn from this, and most importantly, ensure that fairness and respect guide your future decisions. Mistreating someone based on assumptions or fear undermines trust and justice. The boy listened quietly, absorbing every word. Relief washed over him, but a deeper understanding began to take root. He realized that the world could be unfair, that people in positions of authority could make mistakes, but that intervention, accountability, and courage could restore balance. He thought about how his calm, his truth, and his willingness to speak up had combined with the timely intervention of the influential figure to change the outcome. As the officers nodded and murmured their agreement, the boy's parents stepped forward. His mother spoke softly but firmly. We appreciate your apology, but please understand how terrifying this was for him. He is just a child. Mistreatment like this can have lasting effects. Make sure you treat others with care in the future. The officer who had spoken hesitantly earlier nodded. We understand, he said. It won't happen again. The boy's father added, It's not just about rules or procedures. It's about humanity. Remember that. Young people deserve protection, understanding, and fairness. You have a responsibility to uphold that. The influential figure gave a small approving nod. Well said, he remarked. Justice is not just about enforcing laws, it's about respecting people. The lessons of today extend beyond this street corner. Let's make sure they are remembered. The crowd, who had been watching silently, began to react. A few neighbors clapped softly, others nodded in agreement, and murmurs of approval spread. People who had been unsure of what to do moments ago now recognized the importance of standing up for the vulnerable, supporting the innocent, and holding authority accountable. The boy felt a sense of pride he had not anticipated. Though the events of the day had been frightening, humiliating, and exhausting, he had witnessed firsthand how courage, truth, and advocacy could prevail. He realized that being brave did not mean acting without fear. It meant facing fear, speaking the truth, and trusting that justice could be restored. As the influential figure prepared to leave, he turned to the boy and spoke directly. "You have shown remarkable composure today," he said. "Remember that courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act rightly despite it. Carry that with you always." The boy nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "Thank you," he said quietly. I will." The figure smiled warmly and gave a final glance at the officers. "Let this be a reminder to all," he said. "Respect, accountability, and fairness are never optional. Carry that lesson forward and ensure it is reflected in every action you take." With that, the figure walked toward his vehicle, the crowd parting respectfully to give way. The officers remained standing, their expressions a mixture of reflection, humility, and unease. They had been confronted with the consequences of their actions in a way they could not ignore, and the weight of accountability was now fully upon them. The boy's parents gathered him in their arms, holding him tightly. "It's over now," his mother whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe and justice has been served. You were brave and we're proud of you." His father nodded, gently ruffling his hair. "You faced something terrifying today and handled it with courage. Remember that always. You are stronger than you think." The boy felt a warmth spread through him, a mixture of relief, gratitude, and newfound strength. He realized that while fear could be overwhelming, support, advocacy, and courage could change outcomes in ways he had never imagined. The experience, though harrowing, had taught him valuable lessons about resilience, justice, and human dignity. Neighbors began to disperse slowly, some offering words of encouragement to the boy and his family. "You were so brave," one said. "Stay strong. Don't let this experience shake your confidence." Another added, "It's a reminder for all of us to pay attention, to speak up, and to support those who cannot defend themselves." The boy's friends lingered, sharing quiet words of reassurance and pride. "You stayed calm even when it was scary," one said. "That's incredible. I don't know if I could have done the same." Another friend added, "And look at what happened because of it. You showed courage and the right person stepped in. You're amazing." The boy felt a deep sense of connection to the people around him. He realized that even in moments of fear and vulnerability, community, compassion, and advocacy could make a profound difference. The support he had received, both from the influential figure and from those who had witnessed the events, reinforced his belief in fairness and human decency. As the evening approached, the street slowly returned to its usual quiet state. The boy and his family began walking home, the weight of the day still heavy but tempered by relief and hope. The boy reflected on the sequence of events, understanding the lessons embedded in every moment. Fear could be faced, truth could prevail, and courage could inspire action. The boy realized that the experience had changed him. He had seen firsthand the consequences of unfair treatment, the power of intervention, and the importance of accountability. He understood that the world could be unpredictable and, at times, unjust, but that integrity, bravery, and support could shift the outcome. At home, the boy sat quietly in his room, thinking about the day. He felt a mixture of exhaustion and empowerment, the fear and humiliation The next morning, the boy woke up slowly, still processing the events of the previous day. The sun poured through his window, casting warm light across his room. Everything seemed normal, the familiar sights, the gentle hum of the neighborhood outside. But he knew that nothing about yesterday had been ordinary. The fear, the confrontation, and the intervention had left a mark on him. Yet more than that, he felt a sense of strength, as if surviving and facing the injustice had changed him in ways he could not yet fully articulate. At breakfast, his parents were unusually quiet, sharing glances over their coffee, their expressions a mix of relief and lingering concern. Finally, his mother broke the silence. "You were incredibly brave yesterday," she said softly, placing her hand on his. "We know it was terrifying, but you stayed calm and spoke the truth." "That made all the difference." The boy nodded, stirring his cereal slowly. He remembered the officers' stern faces, the aggressive shouting, and the sudden arrival of the influential figure who had intervened. It all seemed almost surreal now, like a story he might one day tell others to illustrate the importance of courage and truth. I guess I just wanted it to end without getting anyone hurt, he admitted. I didn't know what else to do, his father smiled gently. That's exactly what bravery is. It's not about fighting or arguing. It's about staying true to who you are, even in frightening situations. You did that. The boy thought about the crowd, the neighbors and the friends who had been nearby. He realized that their presence, though quiet, had mattered too. People had been watching, some recording, some ready to speak up, all silently bearing witness to what was happening. The weight of community support, combined with the intervention of someone powerful, had shifted the entire situation. It was a lesson in how courage, honesty, and advocacy could ripple outward, affecting not just one individual, but an entire environment. By mid-morning, the story of the incident had already begun to spread. Videos from witnesses had been shared online, showing the boy's calm demeanor, the officer's initial aggression, and the powerful intervention that had changed the course of events. Comments poured in from all over, many praising the boy's composure and honesty, others expressing outrage at the mistreatment he had endured. News outlets picked up the story, framing it as a moment of justice in an ordinary neighborhood, emphasizing how courage and truth could prevail even against overwhelming authority. The boy's phone buzzed continuously with messages of support from friends, distant relatives, and classmates. Many wrote, "We saw what happened. You were amazing," or "Your courage inspires all of us." The sheer volume of messages left him stunned. He had never imagined that a single afternoon could draw such attention, let alone inspire so many people. Yet beneath the recognition he felt something more profound, a sense of responsibility. He understood that his experience could be a lesson, not just for him but for others as well. As the day progressed, the boy and his parents visited the local police station to ensure that the officers' acknowledgement of their mistake was formally documented. The atmosphere there was tense but calmer than it had been the day before. The officers were visibly aware of the public attention, and their interactions with the boy and his family were cautious, respectful, and professional. "We understand that mistakes were made," one officer said, looking directly at the boy. "We apologize again for how the situation was handled. It won't happen like that again." The boy nodded, appreciating the sincerity. "Thank you," he said. "I hope it doesn't happen to anyone else." The officers took notes and promised to review their procedures, emphasizing accountability and careful assessment before acting in the future. The boy realized that the incident had already begun to create change, small but meaningful, in the way authority would approach situations involving young people. The acknowledgement and willingness to learn from mistakes reinforced his belief in fairness and the importance of standing up, even when powerless. Returning home, the boy found the neighborhood buzzing with conversation. Neighbors stopped him as he walked, expressing support and admiration. Some had already shared their versions of the story online, while others discussed it among themselves, reflecting on the lessons of courage, justice, and accountability. The boy felt a warm sense of connection with the community. Even in moments of fear and uncertainty, human kindness and moral action had shone through. He decided to take a quiet walk in the park later that afternoon, seeking a moment of reflection. As he strolled along the familiar paths, he thought about the fear that had gripped him, the humiliation of being wrongly accused, and the relief that had followed the intervention. The emotions were complex, layered, and difficult to untangle. But one thing was clear. He had grown. The boy thought about the influential figure who had arrived when he needed help the most. The memory of the calm, authoritative presence and the unwavering demand for justice stayed with him. It had not only saved him from immediate harm, but had also shown him the importance of speaking up, acting fairly, and standing up for what was right. He realized that intervention, when guided by morality and integrity, could transform situations in ways he had never imagined. Later, the boy's friends gathered at his home, eager to discuss the events. Their excitement and concern mirrored their admiration. "I still can't believe what happened," one friend said. "You were so calm. I don't know if I could have done the same." The boy shrugged modestly. "I was scared," he admitted. But I just kept thinking that if I stayed honest and calm, maybe someone would help and the truth would come out. I didn't know it would work like this. Another friend nodded. It did work. And look at all the attention it's gotten. People are talking about how important it is to treat young people fairly, to not act on assumptions. That's because of you. The boy felt a mixture of pride and humility. He hadn't sought recognition. He had only wanted to survive a frightening situation, yet the impact of his composure and honesty had created ripples that extended far beyond the street corner where the incident had begun. He understood now that individual actions, guided by integrity and courage, could influence a larger system. As evening approached, the boy's parents gathered the family in the living room. They discussed the events of the day, reflecting on the lessons learned and the broader implications. You've been through something intense, his mother said, but it's also a reminder that the world can be fair when people act responsibly and courageously. You showed bravery and others stepped in to uphold justice. That's a powerful combination, his father added. Remember that today is not just about what happened to you. It's about what you've learned. It's about how courage, honesty, and support can change outcomes. That's a lesson for the rest of your life. The boy nodded, absorbing their words. He realized that the incident, while frightening, had been transformative. He had faced fear, experienced injustice, witnessed accountability, and learned the importance of integrity and courage. He had also seen how community support, intervention, and public attention could amplify fairness and justice. The following days brought more attention. Local news outlets interviewed neighbors, friends, and community leaders about the incident, highlighting the boy's bravery and the timely intervention that had prevented further harm. Online, the videos circulated widely, inspiring discussions about justice, the responsibilities of authority, and the importance of protecting the vulnerable. The boy watched these discussions quietly, feeling a mixture of humility and empowerment. His story had become a lesson, not just a personal experience, and that realization filled him with a sense of purpose. School life resumed, but the boy's perspective had shifted. He was more aware of the world around him, more attentive to issues of fairness, and more confident in standing up for what was right. Classmates approached him with curiosity and admiration, and he responded with quiet humility, understanding that his actions, though ordinary in intention, had extraordinary consequences. The neighborhood, too, seemed changed. Conversations about fairness, accountability, and courage were more frequent. People reflected on how a young person, facing fear and intimidation, had demonstrated composure and integrity, and how intervention had reinforced the importance of responsibility among those in positions of authority. It was a moment that would be remembered for years, a lesson in justice, courage, and human dignity. Weeks passed and the boy settled into a routine, but the impact of the events lingered. He continued to reflect on the lessons learned, the importance of speaking truthfully, the value of remaining calm under pressure, the power of community support, and the significance of accountability for those who hold authority. These lessons became guiding principles for him, shaping his decisions, interactions, and understanding of the world. One afternoon, he visited the park again, sitting quietly on a bench and observing the neighborhood around him. Children played freely, neighbors chatted, and the familiar sounds of suburban life filled the air. It was ordinary, peaceful, and safe, a stark contrast to the chaos and fear of that fateful afternoon. And yet, he knew that the lessons of that day were embedded in every corner of the community, influencing behavior, fostering awareness, and encouraging fairness. He smiled quietly, realizing that while the incident had been frightening, it had also been transformative. Fear had been met with courage, injustice with advocacy, and vulnerability with protection. The boy understood now that the world could be unpredictable and, at times, unfair, but integrity, truth, and intervention could restore balance. As the sun set over the neighborhood, casting a warm glow across the streets, the boy felt a sense of peace. The ordeal had tested him, challenged him, and ultimately strengthened him. He had learned that courage and honesty matter, that support and intervention can change outcomes, and that fairness and justice are values worth defending. He walked home slowly, reflecting on the events, the lessons, and the people